I didn't know I was writing a book. I just started writing, and what came out were little stories. And the stories came out while I was meditating, the whole book. Now, I'm not going to claim divine inspiration or anything, okay? But it just came out of meditation, like mindfulness meditation, where I got inside my body and I watched what happened to my mind, what happened to my heart, my thoughts, my feelings. And what emerged were these short stories. And after writing about 100 of them, I started noticing that there was a pattern to them, that they were about my life. But not only about my life in general, they were about my faith. And by faith, I don't mean just doctrine, although I was a young Catholic boy, and was a Catholic most of my life. It wasn't about doctrine, because that's not all faith is about beliefs, head beliefs. But it was about my relationship with other people, with the universe, with myself. And it was also about what I did with my hands, my actions. And throughout my life, I've been one of those people who've been basically a theist. Okay, and I know some of you are not. But I think my journey will speak to you whether you're a theist or not. It doesn't matter, really. We're all human beings struggling to love, struggling through the difficulties, the challenges that are in our lives. And we all have to get up in the morning with some level of courage and especially faith. And that's what I mean by faith. What gets us up out of bed in the morning? What helps us to love? What helps us to make it through our struggles? And throughout my life, there's been a God there. But the older I get, the more Jewish I get. Trust me. And I feel very much at home here in this Jewish place of worship that's been shared with many, many other people. The Jewish tradition has this wonderful word for God. Did you get it? It's a bunch of consonants. Like we sometimes say it's the word Yahweh. But it's a bunch of consonants. And it doesn't come out as any word, really. And it's not meant to. It's just meant to come out as, I will be whoever I will be. Just wait and see. And the more I get into my own faith, the more God is like that for me. Very, very big and very loving. And as we sang during the service this morning, the parts of me that I used to despise, I've learned to love. The parts of the world I used to despise, I've learned to love. Let me read a story for you to get you started. And I'd like to just say a couple words about what I've learned. And not keep you too long here. But just say a couple words and then I'll be available for some signing. This one is entitled The Sermon. It's a little story. Just a page and a half. I was inspired to read this morning because we're in a place of worship. And I was a priest for 30 years, Catholic priest. And I worshiped with small communities, much like are here. I had not noticed the little girl sitting halfway down the middle aisle on the left until a man behind her stood up and interrupted my sermon, shouting, "You don't know what you're talking about." Catholics don't usually speak up during a sermon. So the man surprised me as much as he surprised the 7-year-old girl. I was preaching on social justice and sharing with the congregation my learning from a 6-month trip to Latin America. I said, there's a civil war happening right now in 1983 in Nicaragua, and the CIA is secretly arming the Contras against the Sandinista government. What is our responsibility as Christians and as a church in face of these and other actions by our government? The man was obviously Latino, Cuban in fact. The communists are taking over, he shouted, and soon they'll be in Harlingen, Texas. Without waiting for a reply, he stomped down the middle aisle and out of the church. Another man stood up and asked if this was my first time in Latin America and the first time I had seen poverty. He too missed the point and tried to dismiss me by arguing, the poor will always be with us. I, on my part, tried to not react defensively. I simply said, people of goodwill can and do disagree about social issues. Nevertheless, the gospel is a social gospel, and it challenges me to personal growth as well as responsibility for the common good. I continued the Mass, feeling vulnerable yet committed to the Christians of Nicaragua, Brazil, Chile, and other nations I had visited. As I distributed communion, one woman held my hand, the hand with which I passed her the wafer. Keep speaking up, she whispered. And several others spoke similar encouragements as I offered them what Catholics call the body of Christ. After Mass, on the front steps of the church, people approached me and shared their reactions. The little girl I had noticed earlier suddenly appeared at my side, looking at me intently. I crouched to her level. In slow motion, her eyes riveted on mine. Wordlessly, she placed her arms around my neck and held me tightly. Bystanders were agape. No one spoke. I choked up a thank you. She walked away with her mother, looking back at me over her shoulder. I read that story because, like everyone else, I had to come to learn who I was. And as someone who had become a Catholic priest and was vowed to celibacy, I was having a hard time living my own life. I was lonely. I was alone. Didn't have much intimacy. Oh, I had the intimacy of friends and very warm, loving congregations of people. And I had the intimacy of close friends, among other clergy, for instance, and many other people. But there was something not right. Something wasn't working for me. You know, the whole gay issue, you know, what is gay and what's that about? And remember, it was a while back. And there were no words for many of us. Many of us didn't know how to talk about what was going on. We didn't know what we felt. But we heard society saying, you know, queers, and we heard the church saying sin, and many of us didn't know how to handle that. Some folks did, they were the lucky ones, but I didn't. I didn't grow up in a culture like that. I grew up in a very middle-class, blue-collar culture in Lowell, Massachusetts. And we didn't know how to talk about these things. So I had to gradually find words and find people who had words. But you know, the people of Latin America were people who taught me a great deal. I lived in the slums after being a university professor and heading a graduate program at Loyola University in New Orleans. I took a sabbatical, and the one thing I wanted to do was go live in the slums in Brazil. So I just took a knapsack and I went and lived in the slums. And I lived in what they call the favelas. And it was just incredible to watch people, you know, who were really impoverished in the society. And what they taught me. I didn't go there to teach them anything. I didn't go there to say mass. I didn't go there to preach. I just went there for them to touch me, because I knew there's something I needed. I didn't know what it was. And they taught me about poverty. Today we have with us a wonderful friend of Jeff and mine, Lucas. He's from Brazil. And Lucas is doing incredible human rights work, by the way, for gay, lesbian, transgender, bisexual, the whole gang of us. He's doing that work in Chile, and he's now soon headed for China, right, Lucas? So here is an incredible young man who's doing some incredible work, and after having dealt with his own search in his own way, in his own agenda. And so I applaud this man. He's just an incredible guy. We should get to know him. So when I came back from Brazil, and having gone to Chile, having gone to Bolivia, Nicaragua, that's where I found out what was going on in 1983 with the U.S. government doing things there that we didn't hear about at the time. And when I came back, my own predicament started getting very difficult. Not because I got in trouble as a gay man, or I did anything that was nasty and wrong. It was because inside my own self, I could feel that there was something that wasn't right. And I was enjoying my calling as a clergyman, but there was something that didn't fit. And what I needed was panic attacks, and they came during a retreat. I was meditating on Francis of Assisi at the time, and how wonderful a man he was in his poverty, and how simple, but how much God loved him. And I was very jealous, very, very jealous of Francis. And I went to my room one evening, and suddenly I just felt something in my chest, and I just felt like I was going to die. I can't describe the feeling. Those of you who've had any kind of panic attacks, anxiety attacks, you know what I'm talking about. But it's just, for me, it was a feeling of being sucked in to myself, and just feeling like I was going to die. I slept with my door unlocked that night, and I was just terrified. I couldn't speak to anybody, but it was the first of 3 panic attacks. And when I talked to a psychologist about it, he said, you know, you've been holding a lot of stuff down, you know, behind that Roman collar. And I started dealing with it. And at some point I decided, I've got to leave the priesthood. And what had happened was that I found my own poverty. I was out helping poor congregations, you know. I was out helping poor people, but I didn't realize how poor I was. The emptiness within myself. And at some point I just knew what I had to do was I had to leave the work that I loved, the work that I did well, I think. That's what people told me. But I had to leave it, and I had to open my heart to whatever was going to happen. And as soon as I did that, Jeff stepped into my life. Came just like that. And we've been together now, we're in our 25th year. And, let me share with you something, 2 learnings. The first learning is about faith. And again, faith in a very broad sense. And also you could use the word spiritual growth, spiritual development. Spirituality isn't something that you get at some point. Like you learn the doctrines of a church, or the moral behavior of a church, or the rules of a church, or you learn the worship of whatever group you're with. That's not what faith is alone. That's only a little part of it, right? Faith is something that grows, and if it doesn't grow, it's dead. So let me read you something that describes the way I experienced it. And you may have experienced it differently, but I bet you see some patterns. Okay? And I'll give you a hint. There's great studies done of faith development starting in the 1970s. And they were built on the developmental psychologists like Erikson, Piaget, those people, for those of you who know those folks. And we studied the development of faith. And there are a few stages of faith, but 3 main ones are the narcissistic phase, that, it's all about getting something for me. Give me this, give me that. Another phase is the conventional phase, where you realize it's not only about that, it's about us. About us, as a group, as a church, as a synagogue, a worshiping community of whatever kind, right? And it's about the civic society, it's about us. And that's a conventional stage. And then there's a post-conventional stage, where we individuate as persons and grow that way. And then there are other stages after, in which we identify with greater and greater parts of the world around us. And we start to find this I am person. So here it is, the way I wrote it in the book.
I was just going to mention one quick thing with we're just checking the page.
Thanks.
After he reads this, we're going to take about a 10-minute pause for questions.
Yes.
Not to distract you while he's reading, but and feel free, really, gay, married, or priest, if any of those words trigger something, or confessions. The juicier the question. There's no limits.
Thank you. In the beginning, God, you made me celibate. You were pleased that I entered Catholic seminary at 14 and that I had chosen you over girls and sex. When I had impure thoughts or I touched myself, you insisted I confess it to a priest. But you did little when I fell into dark moods and feelings of not being acceptable. But God, you changed. When I was 19 and attending a spiritual retreat, you showed me that I was not alone. You are not alone. And that I was part of your grand plan. You got me enthused about church community, ritual, and theology. You saw that I was confused about sexual attraction. You relieved me when I confessed my weakness to a priest. Your love consoled me when I fell into my moods. You accepted me. But you started to confuse me in my early 20s. When I took a leave from seminary, you wanted me to confess and admit my guilt about masturbating. But you seemed happy that I had finally done it. You didn't seem to mind when I got physical with a girl, and didn't go all the way. But you were definitely uncomfortable when I lusted for her brother. This is very frank. I've got 2 aunts that are still alive that are nuns, and when I dedicated the book partly to them, and I called them and I said, "How was it?" I said, it's kind of frank. And they said, we loved your honesty. And we're talking 85-year-old nuns. Okay? We loved your honesty. I said, about sex? He said, oh yeah, we loved it. So when I was about 27, in seminary again and exposed to the women's movement, you had a sex change. I discovered that you weren't really a he, or a she for that matter, and that my gender ascriptions were anthropomorphic projections. Now that you had a new identity, you didn't mind when I started to hold and be held by close male friends. You even stopped demanding that I confess those encounters to a priest. But you were pleased when I was honest about them with close friends and guides. You label these encounters as explorations into my identity and saw them as part of my growth process. I felt guilty about going all the way, so I never did. When I finally did and had a boyfriend, you supported the personal growth that ensued. But you were concerned that the relationship if it became public, it would negatively impact my reputation as a celibate priest. You left me feeling conflicted about celibacy and put me through several periods of sexual abstinence. You let me see that my boyfriend was gay, but you couldn't convince me that I was. In my late 30s, you assumed the role of sex therapist. I was on retreat again, and in prayer I got jealous of the love you had for Francis of Assisi. You hit me with a panic attack. You let decades of sexual repression blow my lid. Then to quell my fears and dry my tears, you said you really did love me as I am, as a gay man. You said, I made you that way. That's how I love you. And that's how you love me. You made it clear to me, God, that you had no preference as to whether I remained a celibate priest or left and found a lover, perhaps. The choice was all mine. You refused my father projections too. You made it clear that you now trusted me to take charge, take risks, and be creative. Before long, I chose to leave the priesthood and find a personally more genuine life. God, we have become a we, like faithful lovers. We partner to create home, community, and a just society. We attend to each other's needs and rely on each other's strengths. When we squabble over differences, we faithfully work them out together, trusting our basic love. You're full of surprises. I've learned that I know only a small part of you. You change, and you sometimes confuse me about what you're doing. Yet you always assure me that I am deeply loved. I trust you. Thank you. Before we take any comments, questions, I'd simply like to say that my goal today is to do three things with you, to encourage three things. I'd like to encourage you to reflect on your faith journey, whatever it might be and however you might verbalize your spiritual growth and change. Secondly, I'd also like to encourage you to share it with your children and grandchildren and the next generation. Because some people have said, you know, I wish that old people would tell us what they learned and make it accessible to us. I've had a lot of that. And I've also had folks on in life say, I wish I could write my memoir. Well, this is a way of doing it. You know, just little stories that you remember, and it creates a pattern. You'll see patterns as you write those little stories. Not a big, long, boring thing about, you know, all kinds of stuff that doesn't matter, but just little things that, just write about little things that matter, and write it real short, but very concrete, specific, very sensate. How it smells, how it tastes, what it looks like, how it feels, right? And it's not hard to do. And you just write it down. And so that's the third thing I'd encourage, that if you like writing, do it, write it. And other people do it in song or dance or whatever, but it's an incredible thing it helped me to integrate my life and really come to a sense of incredible appreciation for what I've been through, every bit of it. And it's so gratifying to have that as we age, isn't it? Have that sense of appreciation and not looking back and saying,